Stand up. Step away from the bag. Now.
I'm a federal court clerk. You have no legal basis to detain me.
You don't tell me how to do my job. Hands behind your back!
You're violating my constitutional rights. This is on camera.
Stop resisting!
I am not resisting.
The steel cuffs bit into wrists that were accustomed to the smooth texture of Italian wool and the weight of a Mont Blanc fountain pen, not the cold, unforgiving bite of state-issued restraint. The passers-by on the sidewalk stopped dead in their tracks. Phones raised eyes wide, witnessing a scene that felt disturbingly familiar, yet utterly wrong. Officer Kyle Braden, 27 years old and flushed with the adrenaline of what he thought was a career-making bust, tightened his grip on the suspect's arm. But he had absolutely no idea that the man he was shoving toward the squad car, the man in the $3,000 bespoke suit, was not a drug courier, not a fraudster, and not a threat. Marcus Thorne was the senior clerk for the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and the leather briefcase Officer Braden had just tossed carelessly onto the hood of his cruiser contained confidential draft opinions for 3 federal judges and sealed grand jury indictments. Marcus wasn't panicking. He wasn't screaming. He was calculating the civil rights lawsuit that was about to bankrupt the city. Before we unravel this tangled web of incompetence and arrogance, I need you to take a second. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Do you know your rights? Drop a comment below and tell me what state or country are you watching from. I want to see how far this community reaches. And if you believe that nobody, absolutely nobody, should be above the law, especially the people wearing badges, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. We are building something important here, and you need to be part of it. Because what happens to Marcus next? It could happen to your father, your brother, or you. To understand how a sunny Tuesday afternoon in the financial district turned into a constitutional crisis, we have to go back 30 minutes. The city clock tower had just struck noon. The sun was high and bright, casting sharp shadows against the granite skyscrapers. Marcus Thorne had claimed his usual spot on a wrought iron bench in the plaza, a small oasis of greenery amidst the concrete jungle. At 48 years old, Marcus carried himself with the quiet, devastating confidence of a man who knows exactly how the world works because he helps write the rules. He was a legal scholar, a gatekeeper for the federal judiciary, and a man who valued his lunch-hour silence above almost anything else. He had a roast beef sandwich from the deli around the corner, untouched, sitting next to him. His attention was entirely focused on a stack of documents resting on his lap. He was reviewing a dissent on a complex Fourth Amendment case regarding digital privacy. He held a red pen occasionally, making precise, savage marks in the margins. Next to him on the bench sat his briefcase. It was a distressed leather satchel vintage, looking like it had seen 100 courtrooms. It was the kind of bag that screamed old money or serious business. To Marcus, it was just his office. To the eyes of the young patrolman cruising slowly past the plaza, it was a target. Marcus took a sip of his black coffee, savoring the bitterness. He adjusted his glasses, reading a paragraph where the lower court had erred in its application of qualified immunity. He shook his head slightly, a small frown creasing his forehead. He was in his element. He was a black man in a suit, sitting on a bench doing his job. There was no music playing, no yelling, no erratic movement. There was just a man reading. But in the distorted reality of modern policing, just reading can look a lot like loitering with intent if the observer is looking through a lens of bias. The police cruiser slowed to a crawl. The window rolled down. Marcus didn't look up. He was used to the noise of the city. A car engine meant nothing to him. He turned the page, circling a citation that was incorrect. He didn't see Officer Kyle Braden watching him. Braden had been on the force for 4 years. He was young, hungry for action, and deeply convinced that he had a sixth sense for criminal activity. He didn't see a court clerk. He saw a man who didn't fit his mental image of the financial district's legitimate denizens. He saw an expensive bag. He saw a black man sitting alone. And in Braden's mind, The math added up to something illicit. Maybe a drop-off, maybe a lookout. Whatever it was, Braden decided he was going to be the hero who stopped it. He put the cruiser in park, but he didn't turn off the lights. He stepped out, adjusting his belt, his hand instinctively hovering near his radio. The confrontation had begun, and Marcus didn't even know he was a participant yet. The shadow fell across the legal brief before the voice did. Marcus paused, his red pen hovering over a split infinitive. He didn't jump. He didn't flinch. He simply finished the correction, capped his pen, and looked up slowly. Standing before him was Officer Braden stance-wide sunglasses on, despite the fact that he was standing in the shade of the skyscraper. The officer's uniform was crisp, his boots polished, but his body language was all wrong. It was aggressive, encroaching. It was the stance of a predator who thinks he's cornered prey. "How we doing today?" Braden asked. It wasn't a greeting. It was an opening salvo. The tone was flat, demanding a response rather than inviting one. Marcus looked the officer in the eye, his expression neutral. "I'm doing quite well, officer. And you?" "Reasonable," Braden said, his eyes flicking down to the papers in Marcus's lap and then to the leather briefcase on the bench. "You've been sitting here a while." Marcus checked his watch. 19 minutes to be precise. Is there a time limit on lunch breaks in this sector? Braden didn't like that. He didn't like the vocabulary, and he certainly didn't like the lack of fear. Most people, even innocent ones, got nervous when a cop loomed over them. Marcus looked like he was bored. "We've had some reports of suspicious activity in the area," Braden lied. It was the standard opener, the vague pretext used to fish for information. Lots of high-value thefts, fraud schemes. People moving things they shouldn't be moving. "That sounds troubling," Marcus said, his voice level. "I hope you catch them." He made a move to open his sandwich wrapper, signaling that the conversation was over. Braden took a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "What's in the bag?" Marcus stopped. He placed the sandwich down. The air around the bench seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was the pivot point. This was the moment the encounter shifted from a consensual contact to a Fourth Amendment battleground. "That is my briefcase," Marcus said softly, "and it contains my personal and professional effects." "I asked what's in it." Braden pressed his voice, rising slightly. "You got a lot of cash in there, electronics. Maybe something you're waiting to hand off to someone." "Officer," Marcus said, removing his reading glasses and folding them deliberately. "I am under no obligation to discuss the contents of my personal property with you. Unless you have a warrant or specific, articulable, reasonable suspicion that I have committed a crime, am committing a crime, or am about to commit a crime, I am going to return to my lunch. Are we done here?" Braden's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to hearing the legal standard for a Terry stop quoted back to him by a guy on a park bench. He felt the heat of embarrassment rising up his neck. There were other people in the plaza now, bankers eating salads, tourists taking photos. Some of them were looking. Braden felt he was losing control of the narrative. He couldn't walk away now. It would look like weakness. He had to double down. "I'm conducting an investigation," Braden stated, moving his hand to rest on his belt near his cuffs. "And you're acting evasive. That makes me suspicious. Now stand up and step away from the bag." Marcus remained seated. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew the case law better than the academy instructor who had taught Braden. Florida versus Royer, United States versus Mendenhall. He knew that evasiveness alone, especially the refusal to answer questions during a consensual encounter, did not constitute reasonable suspicion. He was watching a constitutional violation unfold in real time, and he was the victim. "I am not evasive, officer. I am asserting my rights. There is a distinction, one that the Supreme Court has upheld repeatedly. I am not standing up. I am not stepping away from my property, Am I being detained or am I free to go? You're detained, Braden snapped, for loitering and disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I am sitting on a bench reading a document. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't obstructed pedestrian traffic. I haven't used profanity. Please articulate for me and for the camera that woman over there is pointing at us exactly how my conduct is disorderly. Braden whipped his head around. Sure enough, a woman in a business suit about 20 feet away was holding her phone up filming. The red dot was recording. This should have been Braden's cue to de-escalate, to call a supervisor, to realize he was in over his head. Instead, it pushed him over the edge. He felt cornered. He felt his authority crumbling. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, send me a unit. 10:15. I've got a non-compliant male resisting investigation. Marcus sighed, a sound of deep, profound exhaustion. Officer, you are making a mistake that is going to cost you your career. That briefcase contains confidential materials belonging to the United States federal government. If you touch it, if you open it, you are violating federal law and judicial privilege. Federal government, huh? Braden scoffed. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Usually it's, I know the mayor. Get up, now. Braden didn't wait for compliance. He lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the left arm and yanking him upward. The papers on Marcus's lap, the draft opinion that would decide the fate of digital privacy rights for millions of Americans, scattered onto the dirty pavement. The red pen rolled into the gutter. That is assault, Marcus said, his voice turning to ice. He didn't resist physically. He knew that any resistance would be used to justify further violence. He went limp, allowing himself to be manhandled, but his words were sharp as daggers. You have no probable cause. You have no warrant. You are operating on bias and ego. Turn around, Braden shouted, twisting Marcus's arm behind his back with unnecessary force. He kicked Marcus's legs apart. Stop fighting. Stop resisting. I am not resisting, Marcus said, clearly speaking for the benefit of the witnesses and the recording phones. I am complying under duress. I am a clerk for the United States Court of Appeals. You are arresting a federal official without cause. The crowd was gathering now. Hey, he wasn't doing anything, a man in a construction vest yelled. He was just eating lunch. Back up, Braden yelled at the crowd, panic edging into his voice. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. Click, click. The sound was final. Marcus Thorne, a man who had shaken hands with Supreme Court justices, was now shackled like a common criminal in the middle of the city he served. Braden marched Marcus to the cruiser. He shoved him into the back seat, the hard plastic unforgiving. Then the officer went back for the evidence. He picked up the leather briefcase. He didn't treat it with respect. He swung it by the handle, throwing it into the front passenger seat of his patrol car. He didn't notice the weight of it or the quality of the leather. He just saw a prize. He picked up the scattered papers from the ground, crumbling them into a ball, and tossed them in the back with Marcus. You're going to regret that, Marcus said from the back seat, staring at the crumbled legal opinion. Those are official court documents. Yeah. Tell it to the judge. Braden sneered, slamming the door. Oh, Marcus whispered to himself as the engine roared to life. I intend to, and she is not going to be happy. The ride to the precinct was short, maybe 10 minutes, but the silence inside the cruiser was deafening. Braden was riding high on adrenaline, his heart pounding, convincing himself he'd just snagged a big fish. Maybe a money launderer, maybe a drug kingpin's accountant. He kept glancing at the briefcase in the passenger seat, itching to open it. Marcus in the back sat perfectly still. He closed his eyes and began to mentally draft the ex parte motion he would file. He memorized the officer's name from the dashboard ID card. Kyle Braden, badge 4922. He memorized the time. He memorized the route. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a litigator gathering evidence. They pulled into the precinct's underground garage. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow pallor on everything. Braden hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. Processing." He marched Marcus through the heavy steel doors, past the holding cells where men in orange jumpsuits looked up with tired eyes. They entered the main booking area. It was a chaotic room, phones ringing, officers typing reports, the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Miller. Miller was 55, with gray hair cut close to his scalp and eyes that had seen every lie, every tragedy, and every screw-up the city had to offer. He was eating a turkey sandwich and didn't look up immediately. "What do you got, Braden?" Miller asked, his mouth half full. "Suspicious behavior, loitering, disorderly resisting." Braden rattled off, puffing his chest out. "Guy was in the financial district with this." He slammed the leather briefcase onto the booking counter. "Refused to ID, refused to account for the contents, tried to create a scene to get the crowd involved." Miller stopped chewing. He looked at the briefcase. Then he looked at Marcus. He saw the suit Italian cut perfectly tailored. He saw the shoes Oxford's easily $800. He saw the handcuffs. And then he looked at Marcus's face. Marcus wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking directly at Miller with an expression of intense, burning expectation. "You arrested him for loitering?" Miller asked slowly. "He wouldn't identify himself, Sarge. He was acting hinky. I think there's cash or drugs in the bag. I need to inventory it for booking." "Uncuff him while we process," Miller said, wiping his hands on a napkin. "He's a flight risk," Braden argued. "He's in a police station behind 3 locked doors, Braden. Uncuff him." Miller's voice had that edge of command that didn't allow for debate. Braden grumbled, fished out his keys, and unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists, checking for abrasions. He didn't speak. He just pointed at the briefcase. "Go ahead, Braden," Miller said, leaning forward. "Inventory the property." Braden smirked. This was the moment. He popped the brass clasps of the satchel. They opened with a solid, expensive snap. He lifted the heavy leather flap. He reached in, expecting to feel bundles of cash or bags of powder. His hand froze. He pulled out a thick binder. It wasn't cash. It was a stack of legal briefs bound in red tape. On the cover was the gold-embossed seal of the United States Court of Appeals. Stamped across the front in red ink were the words, "Top Secret. Judicial Chambers Only. Do not duplicate." Braden blinked. He reached in again. He pulled out a leather folio. He opened it. Inside was a badge, but it wasn't a police badge. It was a silver shield with the scales of justice. The ID card next to it read, "United States Department of Justice, Federal Judiciary. Marcus Anthony Thorne, Senior Clerk of Court, Security Clearance Level 5. The room went silent. The phones seemed to stop ringing. The typing stopped. Every cop in the room was looking at the items on the counter. Miller stood up. He walked around the desk. He took the ID card from Braden's trembling hand. He looked at it. He looked at the binder. He looked at Marcus. "Is this real?" Miller asked, his voice quiet. "Call the number on the back of the card," Marcus said. His voice was raspy from thirst, but steady. "Ask for Judge Eleanor Vance's chambers. Tell her that Officer Braden has seized classified judicial documents and currently has her senior clerk in a holding cell." Braden looked at Miller, his face draining of color. "Sarge, He wouldn't tell me." "Shut up," Miller hissed. "Shut up." Miller grabbed the phone on the desk. He didn't dial the number on the card. He dialed an internal extension. "Captain, you need to come down here. Now. No, sir. Right now. We have a situation. We have a federal agent or a court official. It's bad, Cap. It's really bad." Braden took a step back from the briefcase as if it were a bomb. "I thought he was... the profile fit." What profile? Marcus asked, stepping closer to the counter, leaning in. The profile of a black man with a job. Is that the profile, Officer Braden? I was just doing my job, Braden stammered. No, Marcus corrected him. You were doing your prejudice, and now you're going to answer for it. The double doors to the back office swung open, and Captain Reynolds stormed out. Reynolds was a large man close to 60, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and stress. He saw the scene, the young, terrified officer, the veteran sergeant looking pale, the open briefcase with the federal seal, and the black man in the suit standing there with the righteous fury of the Old Testament. Reynolds didn't even ask what happened. He saw the ID on the counter. He saw Appellate Court. He closed his eyes for a brief second, inhaling deeply, praying for a time machine. Sir, Reynolds said, walking straight to Marcus. I'm Captain Reynolds. Please come with me to my office. I am not going anywhere until my property is secured, Marcus said. That briefcase contains sensitive information regarding pending federal cases. Officer Braden here has already compromised the chain of custody. I want that bag sealed, taped, and signed by you, Captain, right in front of me. Do it, Miller, Reynolds barked. Evidence tape. Now. Miller scrambled. He taped the briefcase shut. He signed the seal. Reynolds signed it. Now, Reynolds said, gesturing to the glass-walled office. Please. Marcus picked up his briefcase. He walked into the office. Reynolds followed and closed the door. Braden stood outside alone in the middle of the booking room while the other officers whispered and pointed. He knew deep down in his gut that his life had just changed forever. Inside the office, Reynolds offered Marcus a chair. Marcus remained standing. Mr. Thorne, Reynolds began, his voice conciliatory. I want to apologize on behalf of the department. Officer Braden is young, aggressive. We've had some issues with his judgment before. Clearly, this was a massive misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is when you order a latte and get a cappuccino, Marcus said coldly. This was an unlawful seizure. This was false imprisonment. This was a violation of my civil rights under the color of law. And quite frankly, Captain, it was kidnapping. We are going to release you immediately, Reynolds said, wiping sweat from his upper lip. No charges, obviously. We'll expunge the arrest record. It'll be like it never happened. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. I just need you to sign this release form. It just states that you were released in good health and that your property was returned. Marcus looked at the paper. He didn't touch it. He recognized it instantly. It was a standard waiver of liability. If he signed it, he couldn't sue. Captain, Marcus said, a humorless smile playing on his lips. I draft opinions for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Do you honestly think I'm going to sign a waiver without counsel? Do you think I'm going to sign away my right to hold this department accountable? Mr. Thorne, look, we can handle this internally. Braden will be disciplined. Suspending him, maybe even... Internal discipline is not enough. Marcus cut him off. Officer Braden detained me because of the color of my skin. He arrested me because I exercised my rights. He seized federal property because he couldn't conceive of a black man having a legitimate reason to carry a briefcase in the financial district. That is not a training issue. That is a culture issue, and I am going to fix it. Marcus pulled his cell phone from his pocket. It had been returned to him by Miller. Who are you calling? Reynolds asked, sounding defeated. I'm calling Judge Vance, Marcus said, dialing. She was expecting those draft opinions an hour ago. She's going to want to know why her clerk is in a police precinct. Reynolds sank into his chair. He watched as Marcus held the phone to his ear. Judge, Marcus said into the phone. It's Marcus. Yes, I'm sorry I'm late. I was arrested. Yes, arrested. No, ma'am. No crime. I was reading lunch. Yes. Officer Braden. The briefcase was opened. Yes, the chain of custody is broken. Yes, I'm with the captain now. Yes, I'll put him on. Marcus held the phone out to Reynolds. She wants to speak with you. Reynolds took the phone like it was a live grenade. "Hello, Judge Vance. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. Yes, Your Honor. I assure you. No, it won't. Yes, ma'am. Immediately." He handed the phone back to Marcus. His hand was shaking. "You're free to go, Mr. Thorne," Reynolds whispered. "Please." Marcus took his phone. He took his briefcase. He walked out of the office. He walked past Officer Braden, who was now sitting on a bench, head in his hands. Marcus didn't look at him. He walked out of the precinct and into the afternoon sun. The air tasted like exhaust fumes, but to Marcus it tasted like freedom and impending litigation. He didn't go back to work. He went straight to the law offices of his old law school roommate, a man who specialized in Section 1983 civil rights litigation. The lawsuit was filed 48 hours later. It was a masterpiece of legal writing. It didn't just allege misconduct. It dissected the entire sequence of events with surgical precision. It cited the body camera footage which the department tried to withhold but was forced to release by a federal court order within a week. When the video hit the internet, it didn't just go viral, it went nuclear. The image of the well-dressed Marcus quietly explaining the law while Braden escalated the violence became a symbol of everything wrong with modern policing. The contrast was too stark to ignore the calm, intellectual black man versus the erratic, aggressive white officer. The public outcry was deafening. The Bar Association issued a statement condemning the arrest. The mayor was forced to hold a press conference. But the real action happened in the courtroom. The city attorneys took one look at the evidence, one look at the plaintiff, who was arguably a better lawyer than any of them, and waved the white flag. They settled for $2.4 million. It was one of the largest individual settlements for an unlawful detention in the city's history. But Marcus didn't stop there. He demanded as part of the settlement that the department change its suspicious person protocols. He demanded that Officer Braden be terminated. The police union tried to fight it. They tried to argue that Braden had made a good faith error. But the internal affairs investigation fueled by the pressure from the federal judiciary dug up Braden's history. It turned out Marcus wasn't the first black man Braden had stopped without cause. He was just the first one with the power to fight back. The pattern was undeniable. Officer Kyle Braden was fired 3 months later. He was stripped of his pension. The last anyone heard, he was moving out of state, unable to find security work because his name was toxic. Marcus donated a significant portion of the settlement to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants. People who get stopped, searched, and arrested, but don't have a law degree or a federal judge on speed dial. He returned to his bench in the financial district a year later. He sat down, opened his briefcase, and took out a sandwich. A police cruiser drove by. The officer inside slowed down, looked at Marcus, nodded respectfully, and kept driving. That is what accountability looks like. But it shouldn't take a federal clerk to get it. It brings us to the silence at the end of the story. The quiet moments where we have to ask ourselves the hard questions. Marcus Thorne won because he was exceptional. He won because he was powerful. But what about the man who works in the warehouse? What about the student? What about the father who is just tired? Why must a citizen be a legal scholar just to survive a lunch break? The system worked for Marcus eventually. But did it really work? Or did it just recoil because it attacked one of its own? I want to leave you with this thought. Justice isn't just about punishing the bad guys. It's about protecting the quiet moments, the right to sit, the right to read, the right to be left alone. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have snapped? And do you think the settlement was enough, or does the system need to be torn down and rebuilt? Let me know in the comments. Your voice matters in this conversation. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay educated, and always know your rights. I'll see you in the next one.